we can run it back.
Yeah, well, maybe we will sometime. What's good, everybody? We're back. We're live. Happy to be back with you as always. Decent little weekend in boxing. Nibs, how are you, my friend?
Man, I'm doing beautiful, bro. You know what I'm saying? It's good to see you as always, my guy. How's life treating you?
Life's good, man. I got a little time off. Been actually able to watch boxing all the way through. I love when I get to do that, dude. We don't always get to. Sometimes we got to cram it in. Sometimes we got to watch highlight videos, and sometimes we got to watch it late. But this weekend we got to watch everything live. Um, But before we get into all of that, big announcement, obviously, from Golden Boy Promotions this week. One of their biggest stars, Virgil Ortiz, is going to be taking on Erickson Lubin November 8th. If I'm not mistaken, this is an exclusively Golden Boy card. There's no Ring Magazine or Riyadh partnership, as far as I know, though I'm sure there'll be something on the ring somewhere. Got to have that sponsorship. But this is one of those matchups at 154, man. Like, 154's got about 12 guys that you could just round robin and make a bunch of interesting fights. And obviously, you got to lean towards Virgil on this one. The fight with Boachuk, he's been more active. Lubin has, I think he's only fought once since the controversial win over Jesus Ramos. But Lubin he's a hell of a fighter, man. He's always taken tough fights. That's always been the thing I like most about him, even if it's to his detriment. But what do you think about this matchup?
So, I mean, yeah, conventional wisdom tells you, you take Ortiz, but I'm here to tell you, man, and I know I gave Lubin a lot of shit after the Jesus Ramos fight, right? Because it both of them, him and because it was a stinker, considering what we were expecting. You know what I'm saying from that fight. And you're right, yeah. I mean, he just fought in May, I think it was. He knocked some guy out. Um, I don't really remember the dude's name. Forgive me for the diehards listening, but I would say that Lubin is a dog usually every time out, right? Like he's going to come to fight. So he's not going to come and lay down. This is going to be a good fight. I think it's going to be an interesting fight. I think it's going to be more competitive than maybe people think. Um, Betting money is on Ortiz, but I tell you what, man, you know, I wouldn't throw away Erickson Lubin in this fight.
You definitely can't throw him away, but Virgil, to me, especially since the move up to 154, he's taken on Boachuk and Majimov, two of the top guys in the division, and has had close, but fantastic wins. Gets, I believe, decision. Did he stop Majimov? No, he didn't stop Majimov. That was a decision. Yeah. So 2 tough decision wins over 2 of the best guys in the division. He's just so sharp and strong right now. And it looks like he's kind of settling into his own style. And as much as I like and respect Lubin a lot, he's got some miles on him, man. The Fundora fight was fucking brutal. He's had multiple fights that were kind of like that too. He's been obviously knocked out by Jamal Charlo. And I wonder if physically, I believe tactically he can hang, but it just feels like Virgil's going to be a little too much physically for Erickson.
Yeah, but think about what you just said, right? And the reason I say that you can't count Lubin out is we're talking about at the time that he lost to Charlo. Charlo was the man, right? And is still considered by most to be probably one of, if not the better fighter in the division. Just hasn't been active, right? But at the time, we're talking about the guy that was considered unbeatable by most Matrix. Then you take Fundora, who at this point is the man. You know what I'm saying? And proven to be the man. Erickson Lubin has only lost to 2 of the best fighters the division has seen, period. Not in, right now, but period. These are 2 of the best 154 guys in history of the division. So, okay. If he's going to lose to Virgil Ortiz,
it's not about losing. To me, it's about the punishment meter, because the skill set is there with Lubin. It's been there since he was 20. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I thought he was talented the first time I saw him. but you get caught like that. Then you had the fractured orbital bone against Fundora. That really was a
Mhm.
brutal fight. People forget how rough that fight was. The Ramos fight, I don't really know anybody that thought he won it. And so
Mhm.
there's at least to me, he's totally got a chance, and it would take him up to that next level. But it just seems like to me, Virgil's ascending, and we're trying to figure out like what does
Yeah,
where does Lubin sit in the mix?
I think for me, again, I'm not saying you count Lubin out, but I do believe Virgil Ortiz. I said all that to say I do believe Virgil Ortiz will win this fight, and I think he'll win it handily. To me, it's how he wins the fight that proves where Lubin really is, right? I think this is going to be more about finding out where Lubin really is. Like you said, coming off of those, I think it took him a lot longer to recover from the Fundora beating than people think. I think he was still recovering from it during the Ramos fight. I mean, that, like you said, he had a second head in that fight. In a fight, I thought he was winning. To be honest with you, for a good majority of the fight, but yeah, I think Virgil Ortiz wins. I think he is on another level. Uh, but I would be impressed if Lubin can get this to 12.
Yeah, I would too. But and again, I'm happy to see another uh big name US promoter finally announcing some US dates. We're really so short on those, and it's going to be a sleepier couple months, guys. I mean, that's just what
Yep.
it is. We're getting November dates right now. You know, we got like a good fight a month right now, and it's not going to
Mhm.
be smaller cards, but in terms of big fights and big meaningful matchups, they're few and far between right now. And I think that this one is the type of fight that fans want to see and that grows the sport.
I think it's exactly what you said. I think even if you're not a diehard fan, I think if you're a casual fan, if you're a person who's been coming into this sport on the Jake Paul wave, right, you could tune into this fight and be like, oh shit, you know, this is going to be again one of those fights where if you want to get somebody into the sport, tell them to sign up and watch this fight.
No, that's a fact, bro. Um, Moving on to this last weekend, we had back-to-back MVP cards. We had another MVP, Most Valuable Prospects card, and then I think it was like the inaugural MVP promotions card that wasn't a
Yeah.
prospect card and didn't have anything to do with Jake or one of his fights.
Hmm.
So big ups to MVP for doing two cards in the same weekend. Um, I think that's great, honestly, and I think at the moment, anytime that a promoter based here is putting on cards and giving young fighters opportunities, and that's what the card is about. There's just not enough of that, so I think that it was really good. But lot to unpack from the Friday card. The main event being Jan Paul Rivera getting a knockout win over Daniel Bailey. Yo Elvis Gomez with kind of a shakier ish decision against Edwin Humani. Corey Marksman, a big standout. What stood out for you on this card, Nibs?
How good I didn't know Rivera was. So I thought he was okay, right? And part of that, Bailey had a part to do with that too. Like I want to say one thing about that main event, and any young boxer who's coming up right now, I don't know. I've seen this in a handful of fights recently, and it I hope it's not a growing trend. Please, for the love of God, keep your hands up. I don't know what this whole thing with guys getting hit and trying to stare down the guy who hurt them as opposed to putting their hands up is, but that's how Bailey got knocked out. He was trying to be cool, I guess.
We
Cut
could
that
tell
shit
he
out.
was feeling himself. You could tell he was getting in a
Yeah,
rhythm. He was moving well. His jab looked good. Like he was doing some things that looked good. And then the second he got dropped, his whole demeanor changed.
yeah. It's cut that shit out. Be defensively responsible. But I would say that I thought Bailey was going to have a better chance. I thought it was going to be a more competitive fight than it was. It was a good fight in spurts. But I think Rivera to me proved he's a much better and much more. sound fighter than I thought. You know what I mean? It's not all flash with him. It's he's got the goods. He's got the fundamentals. Um, I'm excited to see what he does next because I think that he's got all the tools you need to properly advance and not just get the bullshit opponents and kind of just skate by until you get the big title shot. I think he's got a you could put him with just about anybody right now, and I think he'd account himself very well. So I'm interested to see what that kid does next.
I like him a lot too. I think part of what you said. I think there's a real good foundation there, right?
Hmm.
There's decent footwork. There's decent technique. Um, there's some good hand speed. You could see there's some pop, right? There's some decent defensive instincts. But I think for me, at least with him, the next step is going to be understanding your range a little bit. There's still some falling
Yeah.
in that I think he could have gotten Bailey out of there a little quicker. And I think the other one is mixing up your speed. He's all fastballs, right? So it's all the same power, it's all the same speed, and it's sort of like one big one. And I didn't see that touch rip. I didn't see that variation that you're going to need when you start getting guys that have a little bit more finesse, but that all comes with the experience. I think there's a really good foundation there. I saw flashes of Felix Verdejo when he was a young fighter.
Hmm.
He had that same kind of feel, and I think that the kid's got a lot of potential.
It's different though. Like what you're saying, right? Like he's throwing off fastballs, but he can throw them from different angles. Like sometimes
Oh yeah,
you see guys that are one trick ponies, and it gets them so far. Like you know, but you kind of understand that there's some shit missing fundamentally, right? Like they've become dependent on the fastball. I think he throws a whole bunch of them because they land. You know what I'm saying? But I think he's got other shit in his bag that he can use. He just hasn't had to use them yet.
and I'd like to
I
see
think
him use
that's
it
what it
because
got.
there were pockets in there where he wasn't creating a lot of offense because you could see he couldn't find that perfect spot to throw the fastball when he didn't need the fastball.
Hmm.
He needed the curveball.
Yeah.
He needed a knuckleball. He needed to mix it up.
Hmm.
To get this guy who, once he got dropped, I think really was a little bit in not survival mode,
Yeah.
but he was defense first. He wasn't offense first. And I think that Rivera could have gotten him out of there sooner.
Yeah, I think it's to me it's a difference between like a guy like Rivera and a guy like Berlanga coming up, right? Like when we saw Berlanga coming up, it was like he's got the trick. The
Yeah.
one. He's knocking people the fuck out. He's got power, decent, defensive ability. But the second he got touched, all hell broke loose. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
But you didn't see any. You didn't even see the remnants of other tools in the bag, right? It was
You didn't
literally
have to. It was always a half a
right.
round.
But with Rivera, I see. Okay, he's doing one thing, but I can see he can do X, Y, and Z, right?
Yeah.
He's just not. So I think there's a difference there. And so that's why I'm so excited to see him next because I would like to see him use the other tools.
Yep.
And then I think, oh my God, the sky's the limit for this kid.
I like his accuracy too. I like his accuracy. When he lets it go, it's gonna land. And
Yeah.
there might be a little too much standing and waiting right now, but when you see a guy that knows what works where, and I think he does. I think that there is a lot to like with Rivera. Um, for me, just me personally, the standout of the card was two different guys. It was Jamal Harvey in his pro debut, obviously
Mhm.
one of our U.S. Olympians, and it was Corey Marksman, man, getting a stoppage win after 7 rounds of really solid boxing. Two really good young homegrown fighters. Um, and then of course Yoelvis Gomez with not the best performance. Yoelvis sort of starting to plateau out a little bit, but um, which one of those stood out for you the most?
I would of those marksmen. For me, it was marksman. For me, I want to see more, right? Before I get super. My problem is I've gotten super excited about guys, and then you start to see them in with some dudes that really weren't there for the assignment, right? And then it's different. Like I was really excited about Richard Torres when he first came out. I thought, yes, finally we got a real one. Then you start to see him in against some guys that weren't there for the assignment, and it's like, you know, the Jamal, Big Baby, the real Big Baby. You get him in there, and then you're excited. Then he gets his first non-assignment test, and you're like, ah, shit. And so I'm waiting for that because right now it's exciting stuff. But let me get the non-assignment guy.
Right, right.
Yeah.
No, I get what you're saying. I think with Marksman, the talent is obvious, right? Like he's got great instincts defensively. He's a really slippery, tough guy to hit. He's got a nice jab. He's got good footwork, good hand speed. He's got a lot of the things that sort of like the best American fighters have. But then it becomes about the intangibles. Like, do you have the mental stability? Do you have the stability in your life? There's all these other things that come into play besides the talent. But I think in terms of his talent, he's easy to get excited about,
You
honestly.
know what it reminds me of is similar but different. Hitchens, right?
Yeah.
Like when you saw Hitchens from the beginning, you're like, yes, but we were all kind of still waiting to see when he got that tough assignment, right? And he passed the test.
Yep.
It's reminds me of that. You know what I'm saying? As far as the intangibles, he's got everything you want a guy to have. I'm just waiting for that rough assignment first. I want to see him pass a test, but I think he will. I think he's got the good makeup for it so far.
Yeah. 100%. And like you said, this was the assignment you're supposed to pass, and he passed it. The Saturday card,
Whew.
yeah, but that's a great way of putting it, pal. Obviously, we had a great co-main event, right, with Abbas Barao beating Yoenis Tellez in a little bit of an upset and a real classic. But that main event, man, that made it real tough to enjoy much of anything that happened before it because I can't remember the last time I saw somebody at the world title level, which this was a title eliminator. Angelino Cordova had one of the sloppiest, messiest styles that I can remember seeing, at the title level. And he came in, man, and he was ready to make it ugly. And he was coming in head first, and he was swinging wild, and he was landing about 12% for the fight. So it showed. And, Rivera, particularly at the beginning of the fight, looked really uncomfortable. He's a pretty standard up and down guy. And he just didn't look like he quite knew how to adjust. But a lot of times you'll see, great technicians, they adjust to that. They let you get your wiggles out, and then they settle into their work. He just never quite settled into his work. And so it made for a fight that I felt like he dominated, but a fight that was kind of ugly and a tough hang and a tough watch. And then the judges, I mean, boy, I don't know what the fuck that was. But between the knockdown and the point deduction, I thought, I mean, this is at least a 6 to 8 point fight. And then the judges have it even, and one has it for Cordova by 4 points. So everything about this main event was like an anticlimactic end to a decent weekend of boxing. But to me, and I wrote this in my recap, the biggest takeaway on the night was Yankiel Rivera not being able to create that distance for himself because there's no jab. I really realize he is a fighter without a jab. He's a flicker. He doesn't shoot a power jab. He doesn't do stuff to establish that range. So there's no incentive to not. You can just walk right in the front door with him. And
Yeah.
unless he's going to throw something big as you're coming in, there's nothing stopping you. So that was the biggest thing for me. And then by the end of the fight, he got dragged into an ugly dogfight. The headbutts had
And got clipped a couple of times.
and he
Like,
got
ooh.
clipped. And to me, I get a lot of these Olympians, they want to fast track. They want to do it how Lomachenko did it. I want to be a world champion in my third fight. But not everybody is that or gets to do that. And I respect Rivera for, moving up the ladder this quickly, but he's clearly still a work in progress.
First things first, I want to address exactly what you were talking about here with the judges. Um, I think as a sport, it's not. I hate to beat a dead drum, but the judging in boxing needs a revolution because I have no clue what the fuck these guys were watching.
You know, the one
One,
guy had it 9-3 for Cordova.
yeah, yeah,
Nine
what,
three.
which is ridiculous. But I will say this though. Let me clean this up. Actually, the fight was so ugly. I'm almost not mad that you because at this point it's like, well, who do you score a lot of these rounds for? A lot of those rounds were bullshit. Where it was just like, what did I just watch? Right? Like I don't know which one of you won this. I feel like Yankee won this because he was actually boxing, and
Well, and
Cordova was over here.
through the first 10 rounds, he landed the
Yeah,
only clean punches of the fight.
but if you looking at it just visually, right? Like if you're not counting punches, right? If you're just let me see who's got the advantage in this fight, just from looking at it. What it looked, it was a hot mess. Let me point that out. And then, second of all, if you're a promoter or a business manager of a young boxer who's trying to figure his shit out and get some dubs along the way, avoid Cordova like the plague. If you are a seasoned fighter who knows his shit, you should sign up to fight Cordova immediately because he'd be easy pickings because he's essentially a glorified street fighter at this point. Like it was all bad. The problem with it is, again, like you said, at the end, I feel like Rivera thought he was winning and he got
Which he was,
sloppy.
which he should have been, you
Right.
know.
And he got sloppy and he got caught because he wasn't paying attention. He dropped his hands. And that's what happens with a guy who's got, good stamina, because Cordova's got some wind on him. And he's throwing these punches the same way in the 12th round as he was in the first, right? So it's like that's what happens when you slip up for just a little bit. You can get caught slipping with one of these wild ass punches that you don't know where it's coming from. So I mean, I guess hats off to Cordova for doing his wild man thing, but it's not a fight. I don't think anybody is clamoring to see Rand back anytime soon.
No, 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 no. I'm all set on that. I'm all set on that.
Yeah,
I
and,
mean,
and, it, and, it, and it hurts Rivera because then if you were a fan of his or if you were just tuning into him, you're like, well, what the fuck was that?
well, and that's kind of how I felt. Especially the Andy Dominguez fight was such a fun fight, and he did a lot of great things in that fight. But he did get caught and clipped at the end and got hurt, and he got through it. But when I've watched him, I've thought, of the lower weight guys right now, this guy's got a lot of charisma. He's got a lot of skill, and clearly, I think it looks like he's got kind of a good head on his shoulders. This is one of those, I think it could be a lesson for him if he wants it to be. But, he's going to have to get some kind of jab going, bro, because you're not beating, I know we were talking about him being limited, but like you're not beating Kenshiro if you don't have a jab. You're just not going to keep him off you. So some of these, you're not beating Sandoval without a jab. There's guys, at this level that if you don't have that in your game, like they're just going to be right on top of you. And if I was watching that fight, I'm thinking, well, if I got him, all I got to do is get in his chest and he's uncomfortable.
You could say that about just about probably half the guys in boxing right now, bro. Like think about it. Think about how many fighters could have either more easily won the fights they won or won fights they lost because they didn't have a jab.
Well, and I know people think he's boring, but that's part of what I love so much about Hitchens is it's like, he creates that bubble around him, that bubble of range with that jab. And once he establishes this is the end point, this is where you end, it becomes very difficult to beat him. And you may not
Yeah,
take the worst ass whooping you've ever taken, but you're
yeah.
going to school. You're about to go to school. And so when guys have that, it shows when you get out to the top
It.
level. It shows.
I think anybody who's in boxing or who has followed boxing for any sort of period of time understands that you need a good stick, right? Now, whether that's a good jab or a straight right hand or whatever it is, right? You need a good stick, right? You need that, hey, back the fuck up off me. It doesn't always have to be a power punch, right? Like you don't have to throw a power jab, but you better put a little something on it. You know what I'm saying? Just enough to earn some respect, right? It could be a half measure, but
Yep.
a half measure with some snap on it. You know what I'm saying? It people forget. Um, if anybody loves heavyweight boxing, there's a guy named Larry Holmes, right? You look at his jab. His jab was knocking people out. It was one of the most beautiful jabs in the heavyweight division at his time, right? He was winning probably half of his fights just because he's got this strong jab. Wasn't because he was necessarily more physically or naturally talented than the guy across the ring, but the guy can't get past the jab. If you can't get past that, boom, you're winning fights, bro.
Yeah, it just seems like that's a part of his game that Yanquiel Rivera is going to have to at least look into. Nibs, I'm going to run and get some water real quick, but why don't you start doing a quick recap on a hell of a fight, a hell of a I guess you could call it an upset. I didn't necessarily call it an upset because I've seen Baraou fight before and I thought he was a tough guy. But Abbas Baraou beating Yoenis Tellez for the interim WBA junior middleweight title. Obviously, Terrence Crawford's the full titleist. That will go away once the bell rings against Canelo Alvarez, and Abbas Baraou will become the full champion, which I think he very much earned the other night.
Mm-hmm. I want to say this, bro. For people who were high on Tellez, you should have been. I think this was probably in the short conversation for fight of the year so far. Tellez didn't wither. He didn't get his, you know, ass handed to him because he's overhyped and actually under talented. This was a guy who was equally hyped, equally talented, but he just so happened to get in there with a guy who, again, didn't know the assignment. Right? He didn't get the whole, oh well, I'm here to just get a check and be a notch on this kid's belt, and he'll go on to be great things. No, he was in there with a guy who wanted it just as bad as did, just as talented as he was, and it gave us one of the greatest fights, bro. Like that. I know people think I'm reacting in the moment, but I'm dead ass when I say this is a contender for fight of the year. Um, from beginning to end, it wasn't like, oh, this just got good in the championship rounds, right? Like this was a good ass fight the entire time, and I think Morale has earned the fans that he got off of this. I think that Tellez, even in the loss, he's going to learn something from this. He's going to bounce back. I have no doubt because again, you look at the fundamentals of this guy and who he is, and he proved something. Like, he got fucked up
There's a thing
in
that
a couple of
happens,
those
Nev.
rounds and came back.
There's a thing that happens in boxing and in boxing media that I think is really unfortunate, where guys kind of want to have it both ways. They want to be able to go, man, these guys don't fight anybody. We don't get any good fights. And then when they take a good fight and they lose, they go, see, he wasn't worth shit. And I find that really frustrating, of course, because we want to see the good fights. And I also don't feel the need to write a guy off when he takes a tough loss. I thought this was a close fight. I had it 6 rounds of pop, and with the knockdown in the final seconds, which was incredible, I gave the fight to Baraou. The judges had it really wide. I didn't agree with that. I thought that was off. I thought that Tellez did a lot of really good work
Yeah.
on the inside that he wasn't getting the credit for. But Baraou, he's got that Subriel Matias, Alfredo Angulo type of engine where he's in your face no matter what, and he's wearing the punishment better than you are. And I think that was
Here's
kind
the
of the
thing,
big
man.
difference.
This was high level phone booth stuff for majority of the fight.
Mhm.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Both
it,
guys were very slippery on the inside.
bro, this was high level rock'em sock'em robots. You know what I'm saying? It was beautiful to watch. You know what I mean? Because it's rare that you get a phone booth fight where the defense is just as good as the offense, which is it's ridiculous to even think about it, right? These guys gave you everything you want. So it Tellez lost, but he lost to a guy who's got high level skills. Yeah, people were going to say, oh, he's a bum because they didn't know who Barao was before this. But let's be really clear. If Barao fights anybody else, he probably stops them halfway through this fight.
And
You know
by
what
the
I'm
way,
saying?
coming into this fight, had a win over Sam Eggington, who's a hell of a veteran out of England, fought everybody. There's quality. The only loss of his career was to Jack Kolke, who's a really good contender from Germany. He's been in the top 15 on BoxRec for almost a decade, it feels like. This is a guy who's been in with some guys, and maybe if you didn't know what you were looking at, but the minute the bell rung, you could see that foundation that he's got. It's
Mhm.
some of it's predictable because he's a little bit high guard, but he knows when to explode. He knows when to be on the defensive, and he knows how to put together a fucking volley. I mean, this guy, when he wants to put a combination together, it's scary. And you could see Tellez, even as slippery as he was, he'd take like 4 or 5 uppercuts in a row, clean on the chops. And he had that look in his eye, like, what the fuck was that? It was like that Mickey Ward combination against Gotti along the ropes. It was like 13 punches, and he was doing
Right.
it multiple times in the fight. And you could tell it caught Tejas off guard, who is a little bit more standard in his boxing. And the fight kind of reminded me, there's differences, but the fight reminded me of Jarrett Hurd and Aris Lindy Lara, where obviously Barao was taking a lot of punishment on the way in from Tejas, but he
Mhm.
was able to wear it well and was so durable and strong that the punishment really started to accumulate for Tejas, who down the stretch, it kind of felt like he barely got to the finish line. He obviously getting dropped in the final moments. But yeah, a beautiful clash of styles, a great win for Barao. And shit, man, that a lot of times people say it, but that's one I'd love to see again. That's one I'd love to see him run it back because first of all, I want to see if Tejas can make any kind of adjustment. And if he does, can Barao adjust to that adjustment? But it was just that there's certain matchups where it's like, oh yeah, these guys are kind of made for each other.
Like I said, this was classic shit. It was, for me, strong contender for fight of the year so far. And you know, again, it's an upset because we didn't know who Barra was, and because Tejas has the money behind him. But to me, it wasn't an upset because we got a great fucking fight. This wasn't one way action either way, right? I had it 6-5 going into round 12 for Barra. I thought he
Sure, I think that's a fair
solidly
score.
won 6-5, but I had Tejas winning the 12th round
Right.
until he got dropped, and then it was like, oh shit, and then so I had it. I was leaning towards calling this fight a draw, and then Tejas gets dropped, and I'm like, well, there's 7-5 plus the knockdown,
Yep.
so it's a wrap. But it was that kind of fight where you're on the edge of your seat the entire time. Like the 12th round didn't come, and I was like, oh well, this is Tejas needs a knockout. I was like, hey, if he wins this round, baby, we in this. There's a discussion to be made. And then I thought he was doing some really good stuff. I thought it kind of felt like because I had him winning the championship rounds. It kind of felt like Brow maybe had punched himself out a little bit.
I
Maybe he was,
know.
and then you realize, no, he was just kind of saving it up. You know what I'm saying? And
Or even if he wasn't saving it up, he found something. And that's what
right.
the special ones really do is they just find that they pull it out of thin air, even though they have nothing left.
And I like the respect at the end of the fight, bro. Like again, at the end of it, hey, shake hands, go home and lick your wounds kind of thing. There wasn't any, I've seen some shit recently in some fights where guys are getting into it afterwards and talking shit. This is still a gentleman's sport. They were gentlemen about it. They went on about their ways. I'm with you, bro. Give me this every day of the week. I sign up.
And speaking of gentlemen, after the fight, of course, Xander Zayas coming into the ring, very respectful. I'm a big fan of that kid in and out of the ring. And then they did a little stare down. And so it seems very likely or plausible that we're going to get Xander Zayas versus Abbas Barao next. And I think that that's a great fight. How do you see that one playing out?
Look, uh, Xander Zayas has all the talent in the world. He's this would be a test for him though, because I think Barao is one of those guys, bro. He doesn't know the assignment. His assignment is to come in there and get the dub. I think it could actually go a similar way. The one thing I will say though is this: I do think that Xander is a little bit more defensively responsible than Tellez is. So, and a little bit more slicker of a boxer.
I
I
think
think
you might be right, and I was a little surprised by that. And maybe it was just the decision that Tellez made. He was like, "Listen, I gotta dog this guy out a little bit because if I just keep moving, he's gonna get that momentum together." But he did get hit clean a little more than I expected, and you got to give a lot of the credit for that to Baraou. But I think it was to some extent his decision to hold his ground that caused some of that.
I think Tellez is a dog. I think he's got that dog mentality in him. He likes to fight, bro. He has the skill to box your ears off, but I think he loves to fight. To me, it's like the Fandora argument, right? Fandora's got all the skill in the world to probably box the ears off of everybody he fights, but he likes the inside fighting because
Yeah.
he loves to fight. You know what I mean? Which is why we love him. You know what I mean? It's it's and I think Xander is a little bit different. Like Xander can fight. He can, get into those brawls, but he likes to box. And I think it's going to be a little bit different. But if Barao can get him into one of those, hey, let's get in here and mix it up kind of things, hey man, it'd be a long night for your boy Xander, bro.
It's a fantastic matchup. I can't wait to see that one. The last kind of like meaningful fight from the weekend, there was the main event was Jake Wiley getting a pretty weird decision over Yusuf Dib over in Australia, brother of Billy Dib, who was a champion a few years back. Um, but to me, the highlight of that card, the one worth talking about, is Sky Nicholson getting a first round knockout over Urvashi Singh, getting her second knockout win in a row. Has had now two knockout wins since the lone defeat to Diarra Brown and the move down in weight to 122. Sky's always had the technical part of her game. I always thought of her as kind of like a female Shakur Stevenson. She keeps her distance. She's tough
Mhm.
to rattle out of her rhythm and out of her pace, and very good defensively, very slippery. And now we're starting to see that little bit of dog since she's moved down in weight, and it just looks like she's a stronger, more assertive, more aggressive version of herself since the Brown fight and since the move down in weight.
I think that at her new weight, I don't know if there's anybody at the weight currently that Sky Nicholson needs to be worried about. I think that there's going to have to be a new player that comes along in the weight that's on her level before we really have to worry about her taking another L anytime soon.
Well, I will
And that's
say,
just me,
I
but I
think
think she's always had that in her, though.
Ellie Scottney is a tough out for anybody. We saw her on that MVP undercard. She's a tremendous technician again, we were comparing it to Bam Rodriguez, her in and
Hmm.
out game. I think that's a tough fight. I think Triniga Johnson, who has a loss to Ellie Scottney, but is currently one of the titleists at 122, or actually, I think at 118. But I think that those are two fights that I'd like to see her in.
I just think prior to her loss, I mean, we have Sky Nicholson on the pound for pound list, bro, for a reason, right? Like she's not a bum, and I know it's a little bit different of a grading scale when it comes to women's boxing, but I think not only in her weight class, but I think she's got the ability to pull like a Amanda Serrano ish type of thing off. Like she can fight within multiple weight classes if she really wanted to, and pretty much hold her own with anyone within like a 3 to 4 weight class, you know, era.
I think the problem for her is going to be, Amanda had such an exciting style, and Sky is a much more technical fighter. She's starting to get these knockouts now, right? But once she's in with another puncher or another dog, I'm sure that she's going to need that boxing toolkit again,
Mhm.
and that'll come back. I get worried sometimes that she's going to have some of the same problems that Shakur has had, where it's not the prettiest style for the average fan to watch, and she's really fucking good. And so sometimes I do worry that she's gonna have a hard time getting fights, but I don't think Ellie Scottney's gonna duck her. I think that Ellie is gonna have a similar problem, and at some point they're gonna need each other.
I I I I can see what you're saying. For me personally, I love everything about it. Like I think she is prime time. I think she's got it in her, but I think at the weight class she is in now, she kind of solves that problem, right? I think her power in this weight division might lean to her getting some more exciting fights because I think she can put people on their asses. You know what I'm saying? The technical side, she can do that in her sleep, right? But I think she's found that sweet spot as far as the division is concerned, where again, like I said, she has and when I say she's got the ability to do the Amanda Serrano-ish thing, it's not that I think that she's going to be lights out in every one of these divisions, but I think she
Right,
could be
but
successful.
multi-weight champion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she could be successful. Like she can beat numerous people within a certain weight class. But
She's
in
got
this
the
weight,
frame for it, like Terry Harper and Michaela, they're all kind of
oh yeah,
longer, taller girls that have a frame that can add mass to it. And I could easily see Sky getting up to 140, and being just as
and
much of a problem.
but at the weight class she's at now, I think you solve the problem of her not being exciting to the casuals. I think she can put people's asses in the seats literally and figuratively. I think she can put people on their ass, and which is going to get people more asses in the seats. So I think she's going to be, maybe two or three fights in this weight division. People go, oh shit, wait a minute. You know what I mean? And then she'll need that. Then she'll need that big fight. She'll need what we're talking about. But I think, bro, I think she's found a good sweet spot, and hats off to her. I'm happy she's getting a dub.
In terms of boxing this week, that's about it. 3 solid cards. In terms of boxing next week, not a whole lot going on, bro. We got another one of those weeks, and it's not even like a little pro box card. It's not like a little, 360 promotions. There's really not a whole lot coming on next week. And it's making that $30 a month increase, the zone
Yeah.
subscription feel lighter and lighter every time we get one of these weeks, because it's like, what the fuck am I paying for right now? But
What I
that's
do
kind
want
of
to do
where.
though, I did because we didn't talk about this last week, and I kind of want to touch on it. Is the Julio Cesar Chavez thing? Since we do have
Absolutely. Yeah, I was
light
just going to
weeks.
make the point that, that I think that this is where we're at in boxing right now as we go through this transition period. Big promoters that are not Turkey Al Sheikh are starting to announce dates, but it's like kind of one of those things, unless it gets the blessing, you're not going to hear about it.
You know what the thing I have about the it's crazy because with the Turk, like, it is a blessing and a curse because part of it is like we are getting fights we wouldn't normally have gotten because of all the red tape, money. Let's call it what it is, right?
Yep.
There either wasn't enough or the right amount, or you know, um, one guy felt like he wasn't getting what he deserved, so now everybody's kind of getting paid, as opposed to just one guy getting all of the money. You know what I mean? Um, so it's like that, but then it's like, of course you can go into where the money came from, yada yada yada, but then it's
Yeah,
the
it breaks down real easily.
yeah, and then there's the whole now the Dana White affiliation, which throws a lot of boxing fans, pure boxing fans,
And by the way,
across the
not
street.
just affiliation, partnership. And
Right.
again, we talked about this, but at the beginning of this Saudi government endeavor, Al Sheikh was partnering with existing promoters to supply
Mhm.
funding to create fights that wouldn't have happened otherwise, and is now legitimized himself in boxing and is now going to become a competitor to all those promoters with a guy who wants to fucking tear it all down to the ground.
And we've had this discussion, and it's one of those things where, like, okay, any publicity for boxing is good publicity. Anybody who's ever been in anything entertainment understands this, right? Um, the problem is that there's going to be a lot of guys who are traditional boxing enthusiasts who are going, there's no way in hell I'm going to fight for Dana White because he's going to pay me a pittance compared to what I can make in the other league. The flip side of that is right, and again, we've had this conversation as well. Is there are going to be a lot of guys? We talk about support local boxing all the time, right? That's how we wrap up this show every week. There are going to be a lot of support local boxing guys who are going to get paid more than they or more consistently anyway.
Even if they're getting dicked on the percentage, they've never seen a check like that, and they're not going to be able to say no to it. I don't know that that lends itself to big name boxing though, which is what I think Dana White wants, right? He's a power guy, he's a control guy, he's going to want big fights, and his shitty model is not going to get big fights. It's going to get really good club level guys
Hmm.
that are not getting the same checks, that have been getting paid, maybe 20, 30 grand to main event. And now they're going to be on a card and the fight's worth $500,000. Oh my God, he's paying me 80 grand. Well, but you're getting about, 20% of the fight revenue. But again, they've never seen a check that big, so they don't know how bad they're getting fucked.
It's what he's built. It's how he's built the UFC, though. Think about it. Probably before any of the guys who fought in the UFC fought in the UFC, we had no fucking clue who the hell they were, right? Outside of like the John Jones, the Daniel Cormiers, the Brock Lesnar's of the world, right? Like those are household names, right? But you look at if you look at the undercards of the UFC, he's got the Contender Series. He's literally getting guys out of the farm system, paying them more and more consistently than what they're accustomed to, right? Even though he's fucking them, he's still helping them, right? And then he turns them into big names. I think that's a model that can work in
And then
boxing.
buys a fucking second lake house off of their
Right.
blood, by the way.
I think it's a model that can work in boxing, but at the same time, you're not going to get the Bud Crawfords of the world.
It can't though.
You're
It
not going
can't
to
though.
get the Canelos of the world
It'll never work
to buy
because
into that.
we're already having an issue where guys have at times an inflated sense of what their value is.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
just because Dana White wants to have them come box on the fucking White House lawn or whatever he's going to do, I don't think guys are going to go, you know what? I'm not worth what I think I'm worth. Because the cool bald guy said it. They're not going to fucking do that.
But again, like I said, it's not going to work at a certain level. But to your point, right? You're talking about the club level guys, the guys the journeymen, the guys who were even on that pay-per-view level, but they were always the B-side guy, right? They're going to love that model because they're going to be able to fight consistent. They're going to get decent paychecks they've, like you said, never seen before, right? If you were a guy who's been boxing your whole life and you've been getting a lion's share, but that lion's share has been $25,000-$50,000 a fight, and here comes this guy that says, "Hey, look, I'll pay you 80 grand," right? But he's making, you know, half a million off of the 80 grand he's paying you. You don't care because, hey, 80 grand is double what I've been making, right? So it's that. But then when you get to, like I said, when you get to those guys like the Boots, you get to the Barrios, you get to the Buds, the Canelos, all those guys, they're going to be looking at you like, "Fuck you. I'm not fighting for that."
Yeah. Well, I think that there's an opportunity and a place for him to find boxers in desperate enough situations to fight under his promotion. I just don't think he's going to be able to convince world level boxing to come to him because of that pay model. I just don't think it's going to work.
No, the sanctioning bodies will never let that happen, bro. They,
I don't
there's
think
too
the
many.
fighters are going to let that happen. I don't think that
No,
anybody that's a world class guy is going to take a pay cut because Dana thinks that they're not worth what they're worth. I just don't. I don't see it.
no, no. Even the only way that works is if there's a greater good model that he's coming in with, right? Like, I will say this: over recent years, the UFC has definitely cleaned up their act as far as providing way better healthcare for their fighters. They provide universal training facilities, etc. Right? So these guys have access to stuff that they didn't have when UFC was early fighting on. Guys were having to pay out of their own pockets. for their health care or go to Mexico to get shit fixed. Now the UFC has a plan. I think they've got a union or some shit like that, right? Where these guys are getting, not only they're getting paid better than they were getting paid, still not what they're worth. Let's be very clear, but they're but it's
And
you
by
can
the way, I just have to jump in real quick. Some of
yeah.
the health insurance and insurance incentives that they've put into the UFC are to
Mhm.
prevent competition. So what
Yeah.
happens is, oh, the health insurance on the fighters or whatever the safety is, protocols
Mhm.
is on the fighters costs X amount of money that only the UFC can afford to do because all the other competition has been removed. So I'm not saying there aren't some good things that come out of that, but it's a targeted way of eliminating the Bellators and the Pride FCs and the other competitors.
It's a great business model. Let's put it that way. It's a great business model. But to that, right, you're still getting the benefit. Like you're still getting,
Sure.
the health care. There's no health care benefit in boxing. So, would it be nice? Yeah. But do I have to give up, you know, 70% of my purse so that every other guy can get this, help? I don't know if you're going to get a lot of guys that want to do that.
Well, but I that where I disagree is those two things can exist at once. The only thing stopping those two things from existing at once is Dana White's greed.
Right. Well,
Those
yeah, there's that.
they can coexist. Nibs, tell us a little bit about what you think about Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. here. I know the real basic bullet points of this story, but I'd love to hear kind of what you've been looking at.
So for those of you guys that don't know, I mean, unless you've been living in Iraq, really. So Chavez, he got detained by ICE here in the United States, right? He was here illegally. Apparently, he was initially here legally, and then he was staying past
Yeah,
his
he
his
overstayed
yeah,
his work visa.
right. So he was here illegally at the time he got detained by ICE. So let me clarify that. And then the reason he was detained by ICE is because there was a warrant for his arrest in Mexico on cartel charges. For those who aren't really aware of what the cartel charges are, it's everything from gun, drugs, and human trafficking that they've tied to, in some way, shape, form, or fashion, Julio Cesar Chavez and the people he associates with. And these charges were serious enough for Mexico to want to say, "Hey, bring him back here." He's he was then brought back, I believe, last week. He was brought back, and he was actually in prison. He's since been released from prison, but under the terms that I believe he's got, a monitoring system. He can't, he can't go certain places, and he can't leave Mexico. The second, if he decides to even, if he gets caught in an airport, he can be put back in prison. You know what I'm saying? So from when I initially saw this, I'll be honest with you, I was like, they're just fucking with him because of who he is. You know what I mean? And he's easy pickings because he's dating somebody who's actually related to Chapo. I think his girlfriend is El Chapo's granddaughter
Right.
or niece, granddaughter. So she's directly related to him, and I believe she and her family are obviously directly related to the cartel business. And then I think it's a way. It was a way of them fucking with Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. because he was untouchable, and a lot of people had assumed he was in that life as well. But then you start looking at some of the things they're charging him with, bro. Um, Look, it's an ongoing case, so I'm not gonna, speak too much about it. But I'll say this: they've got some serious shit on your boy, and he's in some trouble. This isn't like a speeding ticket or they caught me with some dope in my glove box. Like he's if he's convicted, he's looking at several life sentences, if not the death penalty. Like he's facing some serious charges. Now,
Well,
whether or not they're how serious the charges are,
and his pops has been untouchable for the last 40 years or whatever, and I think that because his pops has been untouchable, it's given him access to things that not all of us have access to without having the untouchability, the earned untouchability that his dad had. And I think he's probably long been involved in stuff and seen things that you don't unsee. And there's no way it hasn't affected his boxing career. I mean, he's been so unfocused and erratic and substance addicted, and there's been so many things about this kid that have been such a mess for so long, and you've always gone like, what's your fucking problem? Like, you got more access than anybody and you got the talent. Like, what's going wrong here? And it's always been such a mystery. And now I think it's becoming less of a mystery what went
Bro,
wrong.
I've long said this. I outside of AB, Adrian Broner, not Alicia Baumgartner. Uh, Outside of AB, I've long said I think the biggest bust in boxing is Chavez Jr. because the talent is undeniable, right? Like we're not talking like we're not all blind here. He's got talent, bro, and he's got legitimate knockout power. But for some reason, he was one of these guys who, for some reason, he could be in a 12-round fight, but only choose to fight the last two rounds.
He
You know what I
literally
mean?
just did it against a guy that is not much of a boxer.
Who's not on his level.
Yeah,
Like you pointed it out. When he started the fight, Jake Paul was in trouble.
big
You know what I
trouble.
mean?
Yeah.
If Junior fought like that in round two, Jake Paul would have been out of there by round five.
Yeah, that's always been the thing with him, though, bro. He didn't start in round 2. He started in round 8.
Right, right. We saw with when he fought Sergio, right? He has Sergio in a world of hurt, legitimate hurt too. If he'd have done any of that, earlier in the fight, he'd be world champ, right? We're talking about a wholly different, and it's like, well, why not? Why were you not? We've always had that question. Why? Why did you not do the things we know you're capable of doing until it was too late? You know what I'm saying? I've always said this. I think if he had half the heart his brother had, he'd be a first ballot Hall of Famer world champion. You know what I'm saying? His brother Omar, who had like a quarter of his talent, had way more heart. For my money, but now you start to think and you go, you see all the drug problems he had, legitimate drug problems. He's been to rehab, more times than we can count, right? And another thing I want to point out, guys, is this isn't an investigation that just started on your boy either. They've been investigating him since 2019, right?
Well, and I gotta say too, man, like, and people may not entirely remember the context of this story, but back in 2013, Sergio Martinez, I believe it was the WBC. Sergio Martinez was the WBC middleweight champion,
Mm-hmm.
and was scheduled, or it was proposed that he fight Sebastian Zibic on HBO, and HBO rejected the fight because they didn't feel that Zibic was a suitable contender.
Right.
And ultimately, Martinez was stripped of the belt, and the belt was then at that point handed to Chavez Jr.,
Mm-hmm.
who then signed on to fight the same guy in Sebastian Zibic, and HBO approved it. And so I always wondered, like, why does everyone like clear a path for this kid? You know, like, why is everyone why is this kid who seems very unappreciative and frequently unprepared, like, why does everything seem to get moved in his direction? I know his dad's a big deal. There's a lot, Shane Mosley Jr.'s dad's a big deal. So why is it that this kid gets worlds and mountains moved for him, and other great
Yeah.
guys get their titles taken from them? And again, I'm not saying they're all directly connected, but we're starting to learn what that kind of cloud is that hovers over Chavez Jr. and probably to some extent his dad.
And you think about it, right? To your point, a lot of guys' sons who were greats, right? A lot of guys who were great, legends, really. Their kids don't get half as much of a pass as Chavez Jr. has gotten, bro. Shane Mosley Jr. has
Or
earned,
opportunities. Or
yeah.
opportunities. I mean, the kid gets a million chances.
Shane Mosley Jr. has earned back a lot of the chances that he's gotten right? And he's still not getting the same opportunities. And this is a guy who earned it the hard way. Like he's legitimately earned his shit back the hard way. Nope. And his father's going, is a first ballot Hall of Fame guy, right? Now I get it. Julio Cesar Chavez is like a living legend in the whole country of Mexico, not just a part. Like he's untouchable. People will literally fight you on sight who are Mexican if you talk bad about Chavez Senior. Um, that's how revered he is there. It kind of it's one of those things where you're just not getting any level of the same respect for the sport that he had that his son does. His son just doesn't give a fuck. He just doesn't. And it's sad because on paper, like I said, he should be a first ballot Hall of Famer himself, talent wise. And he never got it together, bro. But the things that he's dealing with now, it's like, okay, is that who he wants to be or he thinks he has to be? Like, oh, I think he still thinks he's untouchable because of who his father was. You know what I mean? And bro, they've been investigating you for, like I said, since 2019. We're talking about 6 years. This isn't some shit they just came up with. They've been looking for you, and that's why he hasn't been in
Well,
Mexico
but that's also
as long
about
as
how
he has
long
been.
we've been hearing, that he is doing cocaine or that he is a party guy or, that's about how long we've been hearing about it.
So it makes sense, right? And then the fact that he's dating a cartel member's granddaughter, like it doesn't help, bro, my guy. You know what I mean? Um, and from what I understand, she's involved in the family business, so it doesn't help. You know what
Well,
I mean?
I'm about to give you a crazy good segue. But, for Chavez, unlike most fighters, he had the backing of his father as a legend to kind of push him to the front of the line and keep him at the front of the line, even when it was clear that he did not fucking deserve it. But the vast majority of fighters, right, they start off in some auditorium in a middle school or in some town hall or in a hotel ballroom or somewhere where they don't have that kind of backing and they got to go out there and they got to perform and get somebody's attention. And that's the vast majority of fighters go through that system, go through local boxing, go through their communities to then go somewhere else when they become the best of their communities. So Nibs, as we always do, explain why it's so important we support local boxing.
Look, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. is one generation away from exactly what you just said. Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. wasn't a silver spoon guy, right? This is a guy who the reason he's so revered as a legend in the sport is because of how out the mud he got it, right? There's a reason why Manny Pacquiao is as revered as he is. This is a dude who didn't have his own pair of shoes and until he was damn near 20 years old. We're talking about, right? Floyd Mayweather, for all the money made and all this other here shit. This is a dude who was sleeping in a bunk bed with four other people most of his life until he made it, right? These guys got it out of the mud and then they built themselves up. You can't start in the middle, right? And then say, "Oh, well, I'm great." If you never had to fight your way through any of it. You know what I'm saying? Um, it's real easy to say, "Oh well, you know, I'm doing great," when you had every advantage given to you, right? If you're, like I said, if your last name is Mosley, Mayweather, Chavez, Trinidad, if and your father put you in a position to be this, right? Most people are going to be like, okay, you should have been. These were guys who never were, and they became great because of the people that supported them, right? And still support them to this day. People still support Manny Pacquiao, still support Chavez. Why? Because they were there from day one Their grandfathers were there from day one. This is it's almost like a family tradition to support this person because somebody was there at the ground level when this person was coming up. It's way easier to get invested in something when you were there from the beginning. And a lot of these guys forget that. They think that they have to be built off the backs of people who already made it. Start at your local level. That's another thing too. Once you do make it, don't forget where you came from, the community that helped make you. Don't forget that, right? I see Zab Judah all the time. People talking. I see videos of him walking the streets, of Brooklyn all the time, and people love him. Why? Because he
Certified.
hasn't forgotten where he's from. Mike Tyson can go back to the city anytime he wants because he hasn't forgotten where he comes from. The Oscar De La Hoya walks around LA all the time. People don't forget where they came from, and the people who were there when they first started love you even more. So it goes both ways. Support local boxing, but again, when you get that support, don't forget where that support came from that made you who you were. This is why we do what we do, man.
Well said, as always, brother. We will be back next week, despite the slow week. We'll be here, as we always are, for the hardcore boxing fans. Hell of an episode, my guy. We will catch you next week.